So let's go right into the first team here in the Pacific Division, the Anaheim Ducks, or in my heart, the Anaheim Mighty Ducks. We have an interesting offseason for Anaheim. Thus far, what has been the most surprising part of this for you, Fajardo?
How they were able to string some of these like core players that were crucial to their teams. You know, they weren't necessarily the top guys, but they played important roles on their teams. You know, some guys like Ryan Strome, Frank Bertano, John Klinberg. You know, these are guys that have some pretty good, a pretty good background coming into this season. Obviously, guys like Strome and Bertrano, they went deep into the postseason with the Rangers or whatnot. So those two guys have some chemistry, and I think that they're going to help some of these younger players like a McTavish, who's still developing at center. Who else? Like a Lundstrom, who's also still developing. I mean, he's 22, but I'm pretty sure that someone like Strome can teach him something new, and maybe bring some tips that they may have learned from the team that that they went deep into the playoff with. So yeah, it's going to be really interesting, honestly.
Well, and I think the most interesting part for me is that this offseason was the John Gibson rumors, right? You have a cornerstone of that franchise, essentially people saying that he's going to be moved on, like he's tired of losing in Anaheim. So I wasn't really expecting Anaheim to make as many moves as they did. And I think some of it is to actually be competitive this season. I'm not saying they're going to win a cup, but I think they're going to be far more competitive. It's going to be a more interesting team to watch night in, night out. It seems like with the Anaheim Ducks, they have really kind of lost that way with when the prime era of Getzlaf and Perry. I mean, where they were very competitive, fighting for deep playoff runs, going for cups. It's just kind of nice to see them at least try to be competitive. I think John Gibson had a part to play in that. I think they realized, we have this goalie who's 29 years old who wants to win, doesn't want to be putting on rebuilding rosters or rosters that aren't winning. So I think that definitely kind of contributed to the fact that they really bought in this season. The most surprising part outside of that, though, is John Klinberg taking a 1-year deal, right?
Yep.
Going over there to Anaheim for $7 million. He's a good point producer from the point. 74 games played, 6 goals, 41 assists, and 47 points. On this breakdown, has him paired with Cam Fowler, a very good point producer himself. But I think the most interesting part about that is it's 1 year. I am kind of surprised Klinberg, who at 29 was probably looking to cash in, and surprised he only took a 1-year deal. Now, do you think that's more indicative that he believes in himself, the buy-in that he can make more next year? Or do you think this is more indicative that, some of the best offers were from teams that aren't in best spots? He doesn't want to keep himself locked down into a rebuilding situation. What do you think?
I definitely think that the offers that he probably got were definitely from teams that are going to be doing a long rebuild, whereas, obviously he's 29, right? And playing defense is not an easy thing. Not everybody's made to go till 36 or 40, Zdeno, all right? But I think that he's like, all right, this is a team that got some really good players into their locker room, whatnot, and they have a chance to actually be good if everything can click. And then you do have a stud in net, right, who does want to win. So they didn't get rid of him. They didn't get rid of Gibson. So the team obviously believes in trying to get a team that can win now. And I think that may have finalized Klinberg's decision on picking Anaheim. Whereas, if he would have gone to a team like the Blackhawks, he knows he's going to be at the tail end of his career when maybe they're making a move. But signing a 1-year contract allows him to really take a look and say, all right, you know what? They have some good pieces. Worst case scenario for him, if the team isn't good or good enough or actually do anything, he could actually go somewhere else. But he's in a situation where he can still put up some really good numbers with the forward that they brought in. So for him, I think it's one of those that really solidifies it's going to be able to solidify him as a player. And if he really wants to go for that cash, most likely he can get some more money if he has a good season next year. On the same token, maybe the team is really good and they'll just do an extension if he believes in everything.
Yeah. I mean, like, I think it's indicative of him wanting a year of wait and see with this franchise. I mean, let's just kind of get right into the line breakdowns. This isn't probably going to be exactly how they're the 1 through 4, but I think it gives a good indication, right? So you have on the first line, you have Trevor Siegrist, who had a phenomenal year, 61 points, 75 games played, 23 goals, 38 assists, with Adam Henrique. He had a good season, 58 games played, 19 goals, 23 assists, 42 points. But then with Troy Terry, 75 games, 37 goals, 30 assists for 67 points, and very good season for him. I mean, I think for that top line, outside of obviously Henrique, it's a pretty young top pair right there with Siegrist and Terry.
Yep.
So I kind of like the youth there. And then they kind of brought in, like, you have some guys here like Ryan Strome, Frank Vetrano, Maxime Comitois. Probably butchering that name. I mean, Maxime, I'll just say it that way, 52 games played, 6 goals, 10 assists, 16 points. Like, okay. But then you have Strome, 74 games played, 21 goals, 33 assists, 54 points.
And leadership.
And leadership. $5 million for that is maybe a tiny bit rich, but he looks like a guy that I think is a little bit older in his career at this point, but I think he's kind of found a nice niche in the NHL. Mm-hmm. And another guy finding his niche, I think, would be Frank Vetrano. 71 games played, 18 goals, 14 assists for 32 points, which doesn't really pop out at you. But when he went to the Rangers, you saw an increase in productivity.
Yeah, most of those points that he has there, I believe, started accumulating when he got to the Rangers. He made an instant impact. He's definitely got what any person who plays EA NHL will understand that he's got a heat seeker and he has a clap bomb. But that heat seeker that he can rip a wrister from like almost a point and score, that's huge. Because now, a lot of teams like to break in and, get lower, probably below the hash marks and really start their offense. He can actually help you start the offense as soon as you cross that blue line. You know what I mean? So that for me was something that I really liked about his game when he did get traded to the Rangers, because he wasn't being utilized properly in Florida. The direction that they took, because like when they first had him, he was doing well, and then like the way that his career ended there, it looked like he wasn't doing much, like he was just like a misfit. But I think the game that he had really translated well when he got on the Rangers, and I'm really curious to see how it's going to translate over to the Ducks. But I think with the addition of Strome and him, I think that now you have two guys that know what they can do in very crucial moments, and that's only going to propel that line a little bit higher.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I think with chemistry is a big thing. Chemistry kind of allows the comfortability. Vetrano, as someone who's a Bruins fan, watched him even play in Providence. He's always had a world-class shot. The rest of his game's kind of been always average to maybe a little bit above average and below average defensively. But he's been a guy that's always had that shot. And I think it looked like he was starting to finally figure that out with the Rangers. And I think that chemistry with Strome will be kind of key. Because at the Panthers, he didn't really do that well. But then when he went to the Rangers, it was like breath of fresh air into his system and was allowed to really thrive. But kind of moving in here to the line 3, you have, as of right now on this depth chart, Mason McTavish, Max Jones, and Jacob Silverberg. The one standout, obviously, Silverberg, 53 games played, 5 goals, 16 assists, 21 points. I mean, you got a couple guys, obviously, looks like injured here. 5 weeks. So I don't know how updated that is, but a little dinged up. So that will be an interesting kind of mix. And then the fourth line, you have Derek Grant on left wing, 15 goals, 14 assists, 29 points, 71 games. Isaac Lundstrom, 80 games played, 16 goals, 13 assists for 29 points. And then Sam Carrick, 64 games played, 11 goals, 8 assists for 19 points. Like that's a pretty productive fourth line if that's the way it shakes out. You're not looking for 40-point scores from your fourth line usually. But where I kind of like this team the most is the defense. I think you have Cam Fowler and John Klinberg, who are both point producers, over 40 points last season from the point. I think we can both say, pretty solid point producers and pretty good defensemen as well. You got Urho Vakanainen. I was a Vakanainen fan when he played for the Pete Bruins. I thought he struggled to find his game in the Boston Bruins system. It looked like he was finally starting to turn a corner, and then I think he got dinged up a bit. He's still young. He's only 23 years old. But I think there's some upside there with Vakanainen, and I actually like his game. He plays he's usually pretty good with his defensive stick. So 6 points, he's not going to, break down the doors, but I think there's a little bit more there. I could see him giving you 15, 20 points a season. Then paired with Kevin Shattenkirk, who, had a nice revitalization of his career. 82 games played, 8 goals, 27 assists, 35 points. That's solid point production from your, 3/4 defenseman. And then to round up the back end, you have Simeon Benoit. 1 goal, 4 assists in 53 games played for 5 points. And then you have Jamie Drysdale. Now, he is looked at as a very, very good prospect, only 20 years old. 81 games played last season, 4 goals, 28 assists for 32 points. I think the big thing here is that these young defensemen like Vakanainen and Benoit and then Drysdale, they have to develop. If they take that next step in that development, you could be looking at kind of like a vintage Ducks team where it's very hard defense and they'll make it very hard to score on you.
Yep.
Any kind of thoughts on their defense and what your thoughts are?
Well, if you notice the way that Cap Friendly has the defensive pairs, right? They took guys that are really strong defensively overall with similar stats and put them together, right? With some of these guys like Klinberg, right? A -28. That means a lot of goals went by him and his line when he was on the ice. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say, they're all his fault. But, hey, you pair him with a guy like Cam Fowler who looks to have a similar game, at least points-wise. Overall, they can help each other out, where you have one guy who's a little more defensive and the other guy who might be a little more offensive. Same thing with Benoit and Drysdale, right? Drysdale, -26. That is not indicative of a good player nor a bad player, right? You got to think about it like this: he may just be a very offensive player, right? Yeah. And that might be one of those things. He's also young, right? He may have missed a few things, and it's part of the growing process. Now you put him on here with someone who's not that much older than him, just like 3 years older than him, who has a more stable number of just -5 as far as the plus-minus is concerned, right? That doesn't put up a lot of points, but at least he's solid defensively, because just being a -5 with 51 games, that's not bad.
No, it's not bad at all. And I think for a guy like John Klinberg, if you look at the -28, some people have knocked his defensive game at times, but I think being in Dallas didn't really help. And the reason why I give a guy like Drysdale a little bit of room, he's only 20, right? Mm-hmm. And defense is one of the hardest positions to transition to next to goalie. Forwards generally can be plug and play. It might take a season or two. But with defensemen, it's usually early 20s, 22 to maybe 24, 25 when they get it. And with goaltenders, 25, 26, 27 is usually when they finally start kind of breaking through. And I think with Drysdale, he's a smaller defenseman, 5'11", 175 pounds. He has the offensive upside. If he learns to play really well in his own end, he could be a threat. Mm-hmm. He could be a really good development. Now, I don't think that the year of him, I'm not saying he'll be an elite defenseman this year, but I do think he has the potential in a few years to really kind of possibly be a top pairing type guy if he takes the correct steps in his development. And that comes up to the Ducks and really kind of fostering that around him. What do you think of the goalie situation here? You have a guy like John Gibson who is rumored to be traded. Now, he denied him. He denied all those rumors, but it was out there. And then you have Anthony Stolarz. I think Gibson's a very good number one goalie. I think he's been kind of hung out to dry on a lot of rebuilding teams, and I don't think people properly appreciate how good he is. And I think Anthony Stolarz, if you look at his numbers last season, 28 games played, a .917 save percentage, a 2.67 goals against. He looks pretty solid. And especially him being 6'6", that also helps. Yeah,
there's no room in the net. You might as well grab that old that commercial with the big seal on the net and that's what you have when you look at Solars in net. he's just there. He doesn't have to move much.
He's a big boy.
Yeah, definitely a big guy. I mean, as far as that tandem, obviously 28 games as a second tendy, great numbers. Obviously, if you look at the numbers here on the screen, right, his numbers look better than Gibson, but let's face it, Anaheim wasn't really a competitive team last season, and that's why there was a lot of those rumors about Gibson not being happy and wanting out. I think that with the moves that they made, bringing in some of this veteran leadership, just team leadership, right? You actually improve your chances and you give it a shot, right? And for Gibson, I mean, I think he's got to be happy with the turnaround from last season to what they have currently, and really take a look and say, you know what, it's not the best team, but it's a team that can give you a chance if everything goes well. So it's just one of those. And if you go back to the forwards, that third and fourth line, honestly, they both look like third lines, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, you have one line that has two kids, being led with Silverberg, let's just face it, that guy, he can put up numbers when he's healthy. When he's healthy and he has the right line mates, the guy can put up numbers. He's a good goal scorer, especially when you're looking at the third line. So I think that line has a lot of potential. I think that considering you have a young center, it's going to be one of those where they're going to have to. Well,
it's going to be a growing progress. It's going to be a growing progress this season. I think that's a big thing. Like they're going to have to, if that's going to be indeed their third line going into, which I don't think it will be. I think they'll probably have maybe bump Jones down to the third line, right? Maybe put Grant up there for the beginning of the season. I could be wrong, but I think you get a little bit more experience that way. Kind of hide them at first, let these forwards develop. But it's gonna come down to them evolving. I think Anaheim's top two lines this season are far more competitive.
Definitely. I definitely think it's going to be more competitive.
So, kind of wrapping this up, I wanted to show, right, where they finished last season in these standings. And as you see right here, kind of scrolling down, in the Pacific Division, you have Calgary in first, Edmonton second, Los Angeles third, Vegas fourth, Vancouver fifth, San Jose sixth, Anaheim seventh, and Seattle rounding out the sad sack of the eighth spot. Where do you think Anaheim can realistically finish next season?
I honestly think they can be maybe a 5, maybe a 4. I think that they solidified themselves to at least be on that bottom rim of the playoffs, and if teams aren't careful, they can creep up in the standings. So I would say like they're number 5 team caliber in this division. I think that if teams don't pay attention as much as they should to this team, and some of the hidden offensive power that they do have in the first two lines, they can actually creep up to 4th. But I don't see them being any higher than that.
Yeah, I would have to say, I see that's a fair evaluation. I think, I think from the 4 to the 6 slot is where they'll come in and be like, oh, that's a big jump. Kind of depends. You have the youth movement there. I think they're better than last season, right? I don't think they'll finish 7th in the division. I think that at the very least they'll finish 6th. But if everything kind of hits well, Strome and Vetrano keep taking that step forward together with that chemistry, you could be looking at a fringe playoff team. Definitely kind of has to. We're going to have to see how it pans out, but that's kind of my thoughts on them. Before we get into the next team in the Pacific Division, anything else to close out before we move on from the Ducks?
No, I would just say keep an eye on them. Like I said, they're a sneaky team the way that they're set up. There's nothing that's going to blow you away right out of the gate, but I think that they're going to have really hard work ethics, and they're really going to just work hard and probably sneak a couple of games, steal a couple of games throughout the season that may put them in a better place when it comes to playoff time.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of promise there, and I think it's going to be kind of something to if I'm an Anaheim Ducks fan, I'm definitely a little bit more enthusiastic for the future.